done earlier, and we're recording now. So David, over to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time, everyone. Hopefully today you will learn a little bit about both the Heroku platform and, more importantly, how the Softtrends add-on enables the extension of data from Salesforce Marketing Cloud into other solutions like Heroku and custom applications. As I mentioned on our last webcast, I am not a huge proponent of PowerPoint. Unfortunately, in this context, I think some level setting is warranted. Rest assured that I'm going to dive directly into product demonstration, and we are not shy when it comes to technical questions. So definitely feel free to get those questions lined up as we cruise through this. I'm going to go through the PowerPoint section pretty quickly. So please raise your hand, comment out if you have any questions as we go. But I'm going to cruise through pretty quickly here. A couple of items of context. A lot of people aren't as familiar with Heroku. To let you sort of see what it really is from the highest level, there are a number of both national brands and private labels leveraging the Heroku platform as a service. It is a platform that rides on top of AWS that also is owned fully by Salesforce. So it has 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the Salesforce ecosystem, doing about 26 billion requests per day. That's more than most of Salesforce. A little over 9 million apps are deployed on the platform. And as you'll see us go through one of them, there are 180 plus curated add-ons. These are third-party services, many of which you probably use in a typical infrastructure environment, things like New Relic, Postgres, Kafka, Redis, all those sorts of things, including now Softtrends Marketing Connector add-on. So pretty significant platform. But whenever we get the use cases that involve the Softtrends add-on, it is usually in the form of extending the Salesforce data platform into other use cases. So often we see things like, we want 360-degree view of the customer data. We want to be able to combine sales and service and marketing as well as custom data and start doing things like predictions or intelligent actions or intelligent campaigns. Being able to more closely target customers based on highly personalized journeys. So as we go through this, you're going to see that it all sort of stems from having this 360-degree view of the customer and being able to then do something actionable with the data. Usually when we look at this from sort of a business context, when we try to map the technologies into sort of the approach, typically what we find is within the Salesforce ecosystem, the lower left corner there is typically where Heroku focuses. So things like the Heroku applications and interactions, the ability to do high-scale data ingestion, and then the ability to do data routing and digestion. These are typically the quadrant where Heroku shines. Logically, Marketing Cloud has its own sort of ingestion, digestion, and campaign models. And then there are some other technologies we're not going to touch on today that really sort of look at how do we then layer on top of that AI, machine learning, data and audience segmentation so that we can ultimately get this omni-channel view. So today we're going to focus on the add-on itself and sort of how it plays in that ingestion, digestion model. What you're going to see us do is focus on things like the ability to take marketing responses, social interactions, application usage, as well as things like web browsing and campaigns, and be able to then sort of apply a layer of logic to it. So ultimately, customers are trying to get to either segmentation being identified or a omnichannel view or some other sort of perspective of the data. And they're trying to combine what is in marketing with other forms of data. So we're going to sort of walk through this in a bit. The Heroku specific add-on that we're going to be talking about with Softtrends is a data bridge, often used for marketing analytics, and it performs two main functions. One is to bring marketing data external into something that's either a relational database like Postgres or that is a streaming bus like a Kafka topic-based solution. It also goes the opposite direction. So we often find customers that would like to take order data or device data or something that derives from an external system, and they would like to leverage that within their marketing cloud for either campaigns or for some custom journeys. And you'll see how Marketing Connector can enable you to do that as well. Ultimately, we commonly see reporting and analytics as being a large use case that stems out of the Softtrends Marketing Connector, whether that be, you know, a third party like a Power BI, Domo, Tableau, whether it be open source like Metabase, or whether it be a Salesforce specific solution like Einstein Analytics or Einstein Data Discovery. And all of this I'm going to show and go through. So if you guys have questions, by all means, feel free to ask as we go. Data discovery is something that is part of the Salesforce Einstein platform. This really starts to get into the AI and machine learning and data discovery that can happen once you start combining the marketing data with other data sources. We have some very, very interesting use cases that we've done with customers. Had one in particular that was looking at the gasoline or petrol industry and being able to say for every one US cent that it increases or decreases, that was a $70 million annual either profit or loss. And in that case, being able to uncover some crazy metrics and correlations really, help them drive their bottom line. So this is something that, while we're not going to touch on heavily inside the session, it is something that is often used once the data has been brought over from the Marketing Cloud system. So with that said, let's just dive into the introduction on the connector itself, and then we'll get to demo. So what is the connector? This is built in .NET Core for those that care what it's built in. A lot of people that are familiar with Heroku often approach us and say, well, it doesn't support Microsoft.NET. In fact, it does, and the Softtrends Marketing Connector is a consummate example of using a technology like that on an open source platform. It is available on Salesforce Heroku, so it is available as an add-on. And it also works with both the Postgres relational database as well as the Kafka engine on Heroku as well. It is available inside of the Heroku Elements Marketplace. So if you're familiar with that, it is essentially an app store for the developer and DevOps audience. And so you will find the Marketing Connector directly in that, as well as, of course, things like availability, regional accessibility, plans and pricing, and that sort of thing. Good documentation in terms of how do I start using it, what can I do with it, how do I tweak it, also available on the Dev Center. But ultimately, what is the connector? It is a Heroku Elements add-on that's focused on getting Marketing Cloud data externalized for app integration and being able to also synchronize back. And I think this will be pretty evident as we go through this. There are some extra bells and whistles that have been added in there, the ability to look at your Heroku logging, the ability to look at the data itself after it's been synchronized. So a lot of custom things that you'll see as we demonstrate it. How do I provision it? For those that prefer the command line, you simply issue a command Heroku add-ons and you specify the Marketing Connector, or you can use the GUI, very straightforward. There is some setup, so you do have to drop in or auto detect, what database are we trying to connect to? What is my Kafka configuration? And the Softtrends guys have made it very easy by being able to just click a button and read that directly from the Heroku app. And once all of that is configured, you drop in your Marketing Cloud configuration, so we know how to talk to Marketing Cloud, and we are pretty much good to go. You can then start cranking out the different connectors. Connectors are available in multiples. So if you have multiple instances of Marketing Cloud, you can implement multiple connectors to communicate with each one. That's a pretty frequent request. You can also, once that data is synced across, you can also connect directly to the data on the Heroku side using any sort of database tool. So nothing's precluding you from being able to do what you know best, and that's through a typical database tool. All the logging is, of course, available as you would expect. Usual suspects, so all of that is there. I'm not going to dwell on that during the demonstration today, but by all means, it's all available to you. One thing that was highlighted on the last webcast that I think a lot of people are interested in is the Softtrends guys have been able to integrate, and you'll see as we demonstrate this, some custom some custom triggers, activities, and entry sources into Journey Builder. So if you are using the Journey Builder side of Marketing Cloud, this allows for you to do some very interesting things, such as a journey is firing off, and we had this with a number of our large customers, for example, in financial services, where they were taking 2 to 3 weeks to plan a campaign. They implemented it inside of Journey Builder, and then as they were firing off this campaign to refinance their home campaign, turns out that many of the people receiving those emails had just had their homes, blown away by a natural disaster. Well, that's a PR nightmare. So the ability for inside of a journey for you to query out to either Kafka or Postgres and be able to say, hey, confirm that this is not within a certain, weather pattern or area that has a natural disaster before you send an email that is potentially disruptive to your brand. So a lot of interesting things come in terms of customizing journeys. And we'll get to that. So with that, let's dive in for a demo. Are there any questions on the current sort of overview that I can answer for you? Anyone? Or are we good to go?
Yes, so I've just got a quick question, David. So just for clarification,
Yep.
with Heroku Kafka, so this is, you're using it for what? Is it like a messaging bus or streaming?
Yeah, so Kafka inherently, for those that maybe aren't as familiar, Kafka, think in one light, it is like a message queue. In another, it is targeted specifically for scaling messages at very high velocity. So think, I would like to read Twitter feeds, social media feeds all into an engine and then perform, let's say, some real-time analytics against it. Well, it would be nice if we had email campaigns and states of journeys also fired into that same bus. So as we are sort of sniffing the wire, we can look for marketing triggers that have happened. We can also look for, for example, has David, browsed the website or done some social media thing in the last 8 hours in between when we created the campaign and when it's going to get sent out. So Kafka is all about high data streaming for specifically messages, and obviously Postgres being a relational data store. The add-on works with both.
Sure, but what? So you have like a consumer then that goes and takes that message and then goes and uses the Marketing Cloud API to retrieve that data. Is that right? Is that
you don't even have to do that. So the Marketing Connector that you're going to see here physically will take data that's inside of Marketing Cloud data extensions, and it will post it to the Kafka topics of your choosing.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense.
Yep. So it handles all of that for you. So the only question is, do you want the marketing data to hit a relational database, or do you want it to hit a Kafka topic? What you do with it at that point is entirely up to you.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Makes sense? All right. So again, this is the Heroku console. I am not going to dwell on the Heroku specific things. You're here to look at the Marketing Connector and look at what its functionality is. A couple of items of note, though. For some individuals, they do have questions around, what if this is protected data? Obviously, we don't want to put subscriber lists on the internet, and therefore this is available to be provisioned inside of a private space. So for those that are familiar with Heroku, we have a concept called a private space, and this allows for you to come in and place your applications that are in a highly protected form. It's a dedicated runtime. You get things like trusted IPs, VPNs, VPC peering, all this kind of good stuff, which means that your database is isolated, and thus your marketing connector information would also be submitting into a secure store. So just keep that in mind. That is a feature of the Marketing Connector, but most of you are here to see what it looks like. So let's go ahead and create this. So we're going to go ahead and create an application on Heroku. Now, for those that aren't familiar with Heroku, typically an app is a container, and you typically either put in the backend services like the database and everything else, or you might put in your code. So whether it's a static website or whether it is a dynamic web responsive application, dynos hosts sort of the web server piece. Add-ons are where you place the backend. Now, the add-ons, as we've been discussing, are available in the Heroku Elements Marketplace. The add-ons are the cornerstone of them. And inside of that, you will see that we have the Marketing Connector listed right here. So everything that is inside this add-ons marketplace will automatically show up when I start typing in the add-ons dropdown. So if I, For example, start provisioning Postgres. I give it a free plan. I'm going to now provision the marketing connector, and I'll go ahead and provision that. We can also provision Kafka in the same exact manner. In Kafka, you have two real options. You can do a full-blown cluster, or you can do what's referred to as multi-tenant Kafka. Multi-tenant Kafka is what will give you essentially topic as a service without the need of doing full-blown cluster. That's very beneficial for things like dev, testing, QA, things like that, where you don't necessarily need a full cluster. You also have the ability to share add-ons. Now, this particular one for free does not allow me to be able to do that, but you would essentially attach it just like this. So you could share the marketing connector, Postgres database, Kafka with other applications, essentially unifying maybe 3 or 4 different apps all using the same centralized database. So once this has been provisioned, we are essentially ready to go, so to speak. You'll notice that inside of Heroku, we have abstracted out all of the various parameters. So the database URL here, if I wanted to, I could come along, then be able to connect and see all the tables that are there. Of course, we have our Kafka information, and we could connect to it directly there. So once this is done, let's go ahead and launch the marketing connector. And this is where I alluded to in the slides that there's some basic setup. So if you wanted to, you could come into your database config. This is a Heroku Postgres database. We could get that URL from the application and hit save. Just eliminates a lot of copying and pasting. Same thing on the Kafka side. You could go ahead and put that information in there and hit save. And then, of course, the marketing connector side, you would drop in your specific information here. Now, I'm going to, for the sake of demo, I'm going to go ahead and cruise to an instance that I already have set up, just so it's a little easier to see. But basically is the exact same process that I just went through. It just simply has the marketing connector pre-configured. So let me stop. Any questions just on the basic setting up of an application and being able to then stand up the connector? Any questions on that? All right. Now, here I have my data lake. This is an application that has a whole bunch of backend components. This also has the marketing connector. I've got Kafka, I've got Postgres. I'm also synchronizing with Salesforce using Heroku Connect. So this allows for me to come in and grab my sales, my service data from those systems, bring them into that same data lake. With the Softtrends connector, I'm able to bring marketing data directly into that data lake. The advantage of that is the following. So you notice here that I have a bunch of Salesforce objects coming across. I'm also synchronizing a bunch of Marketing Cloud data also across. Once that data is there, here's an interesting thing that Heroku provides. The ability to expose all of this as an OData endpoint. So if you notice here down below, I have a bunch of Marketing Cloud tables sitting inside of this database, such as quick impressions, clicks, list membership, etc. If I check these boxes next to it, all of that now becomes available through this OData URL. So just know that as we go through this, exposing this is not just at the raw database level, but it can be elevated one level up to OData, which actually gives you read-write. So it makes for some very interesting use cases going in. Now, once we have this set up, establishing a new connector is very straightforward. So I could say to Postgres, I would pick my Salesforce Marketing Cloud, and it will automatically connect using my relevant information. I will then browse for the data extensions that I plan to synchronize. And here I will see there's a bunch of data here. So we'll go ahead and grab one of these. I can see that I have 2 columns in that. And if I browse around to some other data extensions, you'll see that we have a whole lot more. So just depending upon what exactly you are trying to pull data from in the Marketing Cloud side, you'll get the various columns and you'll be able to select those. We then also want to shove this either into Postgres, in which case it'll grab its information, or we can shove it into Kafka and we can give it a topic. The Kafka side would present us with a list of Kafka topics that already exist in our Kafka environment. We can simply pick one of those and it will then drop all of those records into the Kafka topic. In my use case, we're going to just use Postgres. I'm going to leave this as a public schema. You notice we also have Salesforce here. Those two schemas are kept separate, and these are both part of Heroku Connect. So all of the Salesforce data is being synced to the Salesforce schema. And then all of those other tables that you saw that I had copied, those are all living inside of the public schema. So you can pick where you'd like Marketing Connector to synchronize it. We'll leave it as public. And I'll go ahead and give it a new name, Demo App Table. And we can set some other sync parameters as well as the schedule. I'm going to leave mine to manual, and I'll go ahead and save this connector here. So once this is saved, you notice it's in a non-started state. That's because I said this is a manual sync, and I could go ahead and initiate it, and it would now start cruising through and start cranking against all of that. Conversely, just like I set this up to go from Marketing Cloud into Heroku Postgres, I could also send this from Heroku to Marketing Cloud. And I can pick, let's say, Heroku Postgres here. It automatically grabs that. I can pick where I'd like it. So if you notice here, I also see Salesforce or public. So in theory, you could use this to take data that is coming from a Salesforce system and synchronize it directly to Marketing Cloud data extensions. Or you could take your public data, such as orders or Google Ad Click data or whatever you'd like, directly back into the data extension. So here I could pick all of these, and I would give it a destination, which is Marketing Cloud. I can specify what folder I'd like it in. So let's say Heroku Connectors, and I can give it a name. So from Heroku to Marketing Cloud. All right, same sort of setup. I can specify some additional parameters, and then I can save the connector. And once this is done, just like with the other, I can now set up the synchronization from my Postgres side directly into my data extension. So this is pretty straightforward, not a whole lot of complexity going on there. You do have the Data Explorer, so just like with Heroku Connect, this gives you the ability to come in and browse sort of what is sitting inside each one of these tables. In a very similar fashion, the Postgres Data Explorer also allows for you to come in and browse through that data and see what might be sitting in the repository. So here we see, here's a bunch of data that's been synchronized across. Typically, this is going to be manipulated or used through a database tool of some kind. And that's what I'm going to show you here in a second. So on top of that data lake, I happen to have deployed a application called Metabase. It's an open source reporting and BI analytics tool. This could be Power BI, this could be Domo, this could be Tableau, you name it. But in my case, I have deployed this app so that we can now log in and see the information. So I'm going to give it, hopefully, a nice password login, if I can remember it. Okay, so this application, for those that aren't familiar with Metabase, just simply allows for us to come in and drill into a bunch of data sources. So I happen to have listed my data lake here. I've got public, and let's say I wanted to look at my my Google Ad Click data or my Marketing Cloud subscribers that have come across. So I could say, let me look at 10 impressions. I think we just got somebody put us on hold. There we go. All right. So I could come in here and look at, for example, impression region name. Let's see what kind of data we get back. So this, again, not focusing on the tool that you use, because you can be using pretty much any tool, but this allows for you to come in and browse around and pretty much get the data back that you want. In my case, I've gone a step further and created a bunch of dashboards. So for example, marketing analytics. This is all drilling into that information that I just synchronized from Marketing Cloud into Heroku. I can then slice and dice this and combine it with other data. So once the marketing information is in Heroku, you're then able to do whatever it is that you'd like. For some people, that means doing BI and analytics. For others, they use it in mobile. And then still for others, they want to combine that back into the journey. So they want to do more meaningful things with it. So here we are looking at Marketing Cloud. We are looking at the Journey Builder product. And if I drill down into a particular journey, I'll show you what this looks like. So I'll flip to my version 8 draft. And here you notice, aside from a typical sort of journey flow, you notice that I have a few other things listed under these activities. So let's say we had synchronized a bunch of data into Kafka. Some of it came from Marketing Cloud, some of it came from Sales Cloud, some of it came from an external POS or ERP system, and is all sitting inside of that Heroku Kafka instance. I could, using some of these custom widgets, I could drag these across to be part of my journey. What this would allow is for you to query as a part of that journey directly over to that Kafka topic, or directly over to a REST endpoint or a Postgres table, and be able to look up data that is sitting in that repository and then continue on in the journey. So a lot of people typically start looking at the connector and saying, well, could I take my order data and send it back into a data extension so that when my journeys fire, they're able to see quote unquote external data inside of Marketing Cloud? Sure, you could do, using this connector, you could sync that data from Postgres back into Marketing Cloud, but you are in doing so using Marketing Cloud storage. Some of the time that's not advantageous. And so what this use case allows for you to do is to create sort of a Heroku widget that is going to query that repository that has that data, allows you to create that widget, bring it back into a journey. And now, instead of having to look at a local data extension, you're making a call out, you're trying to find the criteria, and if it's true, great. If it's not, so be it. And then you're returning that value directly into the journey. The way this typically is working, these little widgets that you see me dragging across, these are typically done using a very simple Heroku application. So here I have the Kafka one. This is a very tiny little node process that says, when you get called, query the local Postgres or Kafka database and be able to return the result set to the journey. As you'll notice, each one of the parameters inside of the Heroku application, these config bars are what tell Marketing Cloud how to render that little widget. So each one of these things represents what it looks like, what happens when you click on it, et cetera, et cetera. So each one of these sorts of parameters on the Heroku side equate to what you see and what you can do inside of this. So let me stop there. I know that's a lot of information. The goal of this was to sort of make it your time and to see what we could help you with, see if this makes sense, and also be able to educate you a little bit on what the Marketing Connector can do for you. In summary, it allows you to extend marketing data into Heroku, whether that be Kafka or Postgres. It allows for you to send back potentially external data into your Marketing Cloud data extensions, should that make sense. It also allows for you to extend your journeys and your campaigns to be able to also leverage either that Kafka or Postgres repository for what you'd like. One thing that Samad's team has layered in is instant live support. So if you guys are kicking the tires on this, you have questions, you're trying to figure out a use case, definitely leverage the inline support for this. It's all done through Slack, and it's pretty straightforward and easy to use. So let me stop and let's open it up for questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, David, and it's a fascinating demo. And really, I think certainly it's got most of all of us are thinking about all the possibilities. I do have one question just regarding the configuration required on the Marketing Cloud side. I mean, obviously, there's going to have to, it needs to either use an install package or a Marketing Clouding app. Or what configuration needs to be done on the Marketing Cloud side to enable this?
So ironically, very little. When you come into Marketing Cloud, and this is agnostic to this connector, so this has to be done for any application to communicate. But essentially, when you come in, you have to create a valid user. This is the same for Heroku Connect, for example, where you have to say, there is a connection that I'm going to use, right? And so when we create that, that database connection, this says, here's the authorized user. In the same light, Marketing Cloud Connector needs an authorized user, and that is typically done through the Marketing Cloud admin. So you'll notice that the particular user I am showing is Baliles dev, and this says whether or not that particular user has API access or not. So as long as the user that is being invoked has API access, then the only thing required inside of the Marketing Connector is just the basic client ID secret and endpoint information. So it's very straightforward, very little required to be able to communicate with it.
Okay, so you'd create an install package on top of that, would you, then, to obtain the client ID and client secret? I see.
You actually don't need to. You can get that directly through Marketing Cloud itself. So all of that is provided for you inside of Marketing Cloud itself.
Right. Yeah. I bet, but through creating an install package, I mean, it's.
You actually don't need to. The Marketing Connector is communicating directly to the Marketing Cloud APIs.
Okay.
And so the only thing that it needs is the information. Client ID and secret is specific to you, basically saying that this is how you can connect to my instance. The URLs are based on the tenant that your Marketing Cloud is resting on. So for example, in my case, it's MCS7 is where my particular Marketing Cloud instance resides. And there are specific URLs for that. I think this is articulated inside of the Softtrends documentation as well. But there's nothing to install on the marketing side. Nothing to install at all.
Thanks. So are there any other questions at all?
Now's your chance to ask away.
Fantastic. Thanks for running through that. My name's Matt. Just got one question. Is it real time, or is there a slight delay in the synchronization?
So it is API level sync, meaning that as fast as the API can be called, it then is synchronized. There are some limits on the Marketing Cloud side as far as doing things in batches, for example, and that's sort of the part where a lot of customers have tried to sort of build this connector themselves by calling the APIs, and you sort of have to know what works well and what doesn't. So some of the time, REST API call is more performant. Some of the time, a SOAP API call is more performant, and that's what sort of the Softtrends guys have tweaked, and they've pushed the knobs and turned what needs to be turned so that it's performant. It is as real time as the API can pull the data. So if you, for example, say, I need a data extension and it has 10 million rows in it, then clearly the 10 millionth row will be after the first one, right? So there is a lag in terms of how long does it take to do that entire synchronization. Saman, I don't know if you have the last metrics on to give everybody sort of an estimate on how quickly the data sync was taking place for like 1 million or 3 million rows.
Yeah, we do about 1 million rows in around 3 to 4 minutes. So that was the last speed of synchronization.
Sorry, it was a little hard to hear you. Can you repeat that?
I think he's saying 1 million rows in 10 to 12 minutes.
No, 1 million rows in
3 minutes. Okay.
3 minutes, okay.
Okay, that's all good to know. Thank you very much.
And so I do have a question regarding, so obviously if you go and add a record to a data extension, then, the sync will pick that up. How about if the record is other CRUD operations, if it's updated or deleted, does that also synchronize across?
So if the way the connector works is it is two-way sync, meaning that you set up one way going from Marketing Cloud to Heroku, and that will only update based on that synchronization schedule. So anything that changes in Marketing Cloud would thus be synchronized to Heroku during that sync. If you were to try to go the other way, then logic would say you could update Marketing Cloud based on your origin being the Postgres table. It is typically not recommended if both ends are going to be updated. So what often will happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just really talking about in Marketing Cloud, if someone goes and updates a record, that's synchronized.
That would flow to Heroku.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that would flow to Heroku based on the sync schedule. Yep.
And how about if it's deleted? Maybe there's a data retention policy on the data extension and the record is removed. Is that also removed from Heroku too?
Saman, do you want to clarify that? Maybe he's muted. Or we lost him.
Yeah, well, we can take this offline. It's fine if you don't have the answer.
No worries.
Okay.
Yep. No, I don't know that offhand. Typically with the Salesforce records, when they are deleted in the source system, I'll have to confirm on Marketing Cloud, but typically they are doing a mark of deletion. They're not physically being deleted. And so they will synchronize over, but they will have that deleted flag set to true. So it will still be synchronized over, but it will just essentially have that flag attached to it. But it's not actually deleted per se.
Okay.
But with Marketing Cloud, I have to confirm.
Okay, good. I was just curious. I mean, I can't think of an edge, a use case. It's not a typical use case anyway, but that's fine.
Yep. Other questions, thoughts?
Hi, this is Jay here. I've got a question about the custom entry sources that you have briefly showed us in the Journey Builder. We have seen Journey Kafka push and as well as an Heroku Connect as well. Is my understanding is correct that we will get those custom entry points once we have this Marketing Cloud connector from Softtrends? Is it part of that package, or is that an add-on that is available in the Heroku?
Yeah, so the add-on itself, what that gives you is this marketing connector, right? Yeah. What Softtrends also provides, but it's typically done as a custom, so they would sell you sort of the add-on package specific to Journey Builder, is you would essentially tell them, hey, I want the Kafka one. There's also a difference between an entry source and say the activities, right? Yeah. And so, for example, if you wanted a journey to originate from your Kafka topic or a Postgres database, then you would say, hey, I'd like the Kafka or the Postgres, and you would get that from Softtrends direct. Often what we've found is when we first brought this to market, the Softtrends guys wanted to include sort of these widgets in with the add-on. And unfortunately, what we found was the implementers of Marketing Cloud often are not necessarily IT. And so what happens is, in the hands of someone that may not necessarily be familiar with Kafka or Postgres or something else, they can pretty much get into the weeds pretty fast. And so a little more hand-holding was required, and that's why it's not included with the add-on, but it's available as an add-on after the fact. So if you're interested in that, two ways: you can either just send an email to Heroku@softtrends.com, or inside of the marketing add-on itself, you could just simply drop in a quick request, and they'll be able to hook you up on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
And we do have a question from Justin. Who's gone off mute now. So Justin, do you want to ask the question?
Hi. Yeah. Sorry about the whole music before. You mentioned that the API integration is kind of as quick as it can be given the limitations of the API. But I noticed in the connector configuration, you're scheduling this kind of polling. So does that mean it syncs according to that schedule, or it's real time? I'm confused.
Okay, so if when I set it to sync manually, then clearly it's only going to sync on that poll interval. You have the ability of setting this to a custom interval, right? And so the challenge is, it is not going to be streaming, because that is not a feature that's really supported by Marketing Cloud in its current state. So you either set this to a very frequent poll, or you set it to a manual poll, right? So
that makes sense. And in that case, do you have a capability to do any kind of triggered stuff? So if data that fits a certain criteria appears, can you force that to be a kind of a real-time push or anything like that?
So two ways of addressing that. So built into the connector, the filtering capability is not currently a part of creating a connector. What we've actually found in working with a lot of customers is the pull from Marketing Cloud method is something that, no matter how much data you try to, send over, Marketing Cloud is not exactly the most performant thing. I'll just leave it at that. And therefore, it is better to sort of start taking a bit of a futuristic approach to it. So, for example, the ability to create these activities or triggers, we're finding customers that are having Softtrends build, for example, a send to Kafka or send to Postgres. So as the journeys are firing, they're writing the record obviously to the data extension because that's part of what it does, but it's also taking that entire record from the data extension and it's posting it over to Postgres or Kafka. So rather than necessarily rely on the connector to do all of the pulling, we're getting customers more in the habit of creating and extending their journeys to push that data out to the data store, simply because of the fact that A, it's as the event happens, which is better for real-time transactions, and B, it's putting less of a burden on the export or API process to get that data out of Marketing Cloud data extensions. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah, it makes sense. Just to close that off, I guess the use case that I'm considering is, say that you have e-commerce data in your Postgres database or something, and you want to use this connector to trigger a journey in Marketing Cloud. If you want that to go in near real time, from what I'm hearing, the easiest way to achieve that would be to schedule your connector to run, every minute or two, and that's the closest you'll get to kind of real-time journey activation off the basis of data in Postgres.
Yeah, actually, probably the better way to do that is we've done this with a couple of customers where you create a custom entry source that is, for example, Postgres, and that is the trigger, let's say, of your journey. Therefore, it is listening to an endpoint, and that endpoint happens to be the little Heroku app. So when this detects, the Postgres data change, that essentially is the trigger that fires the journey. So that's essentially real time. You could, in theory, use the sync as the method, right? As soon as the sync happens, therefore the entry event is the local data extension and it triggers it. You're going to have a little bit of a lag there simply because of the synchronization process if there are a lot of updates. So you may want to do a custom entry source and make that entry source the actual Postgres or Kafka event.
And you've said that your support team can kind of deploy those into accounts on request.
Yeah, exactly. There's two, and I'm glad you brought this up. So there is a section called plans and pricing on the connector. These are very generic, right? And so these are fitting the 80 percentile. The good thing about Heroku is that when it talks about, for example, here, how to provision the add-on, right? So this is the command line if you want to do it via that, or of course you can do it via the UI. The UI is only going to give you the plans that are available and listed on the add-on itself. These are public. But via the command line, you're able to provision a custom version of the add-on. So Samad's team can actually create for you a custom plan that isn't what is generally available. And he would simply give you that plan name that's specific to you. You are invited to it, and then it's now available to you. So that plan can include whatever custom things have been developed. So it could be a tweak to the actual add-on. It can include, different widgets. It can include different entry sources, and that would all be made available to you as a custom plan.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Any other questions before we wrap up? No, well, thank you so much, David and Samantha, for supporting the presentation. That was, once again, very insightful. I certainly learned an awful lot, and I can't, for one, wait to start using the connector in my Heroku projects. So
happy to help.
Okay, and a copy of the recording will be available on our website at sfmcdg.org just in the next 24 hours. But thanks for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.